I sing like them. My mother, my father, my sister, and my brother, they don't sing like them. I can't stop my legs. I can't stop my
Thanks for staying up later. Robert Klein has been on The Tonight Show better than 80 times. On The Letterman Show, who knows how many times, but I can be exact. In this case, it is trip number 4 to the set of Later, and he's so bored with the routine. Just amusing yourself.
These pictures of your children are gorgeous, really. This is a very homey show. You like the glasses?
Yeah, it's a good look.
Yeah, I found out about 3 years ago that, you know, the Times had to be further and further away until I had to be in the bedroom and the Times had to be in the living room. And people would get, I'm trying to read, thank you, you're in the way. You know, and it was an incorrect thing. Decrepit, getting old.
So you're done in the Sisters Rosenzweig. They changed the whole cast. Madeline Kahn, Jane Alexander, you, all over. But a good run.
It was a great run. It's a wonderful play. It was a lucid, hard-working challenge. It was a very positive experience for me. I think I was getting a little burned out in the stand-up comedy. I've been doing it a long time, and it was, I never want to stop doing it. I love doing it, but it was great to take this respite and go into legitimate theater again. You got no life. I mean, you know, every time you look up, you go to the theater. And I won't miss certain aspects, you know. The Wednesday matinees, God bless, a lot of old people come, but they have hearing aids, and they rent these devices to amplify the sound, and if they don't turn off their own hearing aid, you have this screeching going on, this hearing aid, you know, frequency collisions happening, and coughing, and they talk out loud, and not only them, but a lot of people. Anyway, it has been a remarkable experience, and it's my 5th Broadway show, and I hope that it'll convince my colleagues in show business that I am a good actor. I really kind of let that part languish a little in my career.
Do you have some concern about that? Felt like you had something to prove? You had gotten a Tony nomination for their playing our song.
Yeah, I did. I really felt, unfortunately, after 25 years in the show business and still around and strong, that I did have that to prove. I did a Twilight Zone a few years ago, and people, oh, what a good acting job. Just because there's no laughs in it, you know. This part has plenty of laughs, but it also has some serious emotional scenes. They're very truthful, because the writing of Wendy Wastine is also truthful. And Sullivan, Dan Sullivan, is about as great a director as I have ever worked with. He's a minimalist, but he's great. Madeline was, you know, a pleasure to work with again. We worked many. She doesn't like me to say how long we know each other, you know. So I know.
Well, weren't you in New Faces of 1968 or Comedy Stars of '68 together?
She doesn't want me to say that, but she gave me a great picture of us when we were kids like that. Just, you know, not an empty seat. That's the way Broadway should be, an experience. No empty seats and totally satisfied, thrilled people leaving the theater. That's what the theater experience is about. I'm sure the valedictorian was nowhere near as intelligent as you.
Sonia Kirschenblatt? Went to Bryn Mawr, married an astronomy professor, lives in Princeton, works for educational testing now.
Fuzzy brown hair, wore poodle skirts, started going to Greenwich Village bookstores when she was 16.
You knew her?
Her parents had a cabana at the Brighton Beach Baths. I was a cabana boy. I stripped her the year before she went to Bryn Mawr.
Last time Seinfeld was here, or one of the times he was here, he credited you as being one of the biggest influences on him, and in his opinion, one of the biggest influences in the modern history of comedy. You've heard that before. I'm not asking you to be immodest, but you've heard that before.
Yeah, don't ask me to be immodest, because I won't be. I think it's true, and I'm trying to figure out how, because I certainly wasn't the first one, but my influences were Jonathan Winters and Lenny Bruce. Quite a combination. I would say that for all-around laughability, guts, point of view, and everything else, Richard Pryor is about the best I've ever seen. When I first met Richard at the Improv many years ago, I said, what college did you go to? He was so collegiate and cute. He used to be on Merv then. And he laughed for 5 minutes and then told me about all the hookers and brothels he was brought up in, and, you know. It hurts sometimes to hear him. It hurts. But, I have tremendous...
You need to hear him now, you mean?
Well, no. I don't mean now. Now he's ill, and he's trying to enjoy the restricted life he has. I'm talking about it hurts sometimes to see him and hear him in his prime, because it's painful sometimes. But with all due respect to Eddie Murphy, who I think is an excellent movie star and a very talented guy, when they're mentioned in the same sentence in stand-ups, it's really annoying, and it shows a lack of knowledge, just because they're both black and they're both profane. You know, one uses it much more gratuitously, while the other is gutsy. As far as a guy like Seinfeld, I remember, you know, he was struggling, and he was doing okay, though, about 12 years ago, and he and Miller, Larry Miller is his friend. I had an apartment on Fifth Avenue. I was walking my dog, Moish, and they were in the, had a big German Shepherd. He looked like a German prison guard thing, so I gave him a Jewish name. And, but he was a gentlest. And I'm following him with the New York Times. I used to read till he was ready, and then I put it there. And there's Seinfeld and Miller, and I was so depressed. My wife, then wife, was singing in the opera in Europe, and I was lonely, and I invited him up. We had a great conversation. I think it made guys who went to college and were intelligent and funny say, hey, I could do that. You know what I mean? I don't have to be. Stand-up comedy was a very specific thing when I was a kid. It was, I'll tell you, my girlfriend's so fat, she hangs around the house, she hangs around the house. It was jokes. They were not expected to be believed. There was no such thing as a point of view. I would say that Lord Buckley probably changed some of that. The early jazz comedian who did bits on Jesus Christ that were not disrespectful, but referred to him as the Naz. He's the Naz from Nazareth. And he did these bits. Lenny Bruce was somewhat influenced by him. Lenny Bruce did stuff about racism in the 50s that thrilled me, that a comedian, and I always dreamed of playing Carnegie Hall, which I subsequently played 3 times. I think a lot of guys, Billy Crystal has said that, Seinfeld, certainly Jay Leno, Richard Lewis. I think a number of guys who are just a little younger than I am by 8 to 10 years. There is a generation gap, but I think a lot of them felt that way, and it's something I'm sort of quietly proud of. I mean, I'm happy for Seinfeld. He's an intelligent, decent guy, and he's got a show that is certainly a cut above that people like. What could be better? It's not tasteless and fraudulent, and it's good. It's not something I run home every week to see. I tape them sometimes. I get to see some of them, and I think they're very good.
When's the first time you remember watching a guy, maybe on the Ed Sullivan Show, who made you laugh, and he wasn't telling a joke? He wasn't using that old formula. He was using an observational approach like you developed.
Well, when I was a child, I was very much taken with just about every star comedian. Lucille Ball. She didn't make it for me as much, I Love Lucy, when I grew up, which is not true of Bilko or the Honeymooners. I can seemingly watch Phil Silvers and Jackie Gleason and Carney again and again and again. And Gleason's genius was as much in subduing his ego enough to give Carney free rein. Because, see, he was a major ego, Gleason, you know. But Carney was a genius and a sweetheart. Red Buttons, Sid Caesar, major. Sid Caesar and the Show of Shows. Just about everyone, you know, impressed me. Then, as a kid, when I worked, I was getting a little older, but I worked as a lifeguard, so-called Borscht Belt, some of these small hotels in the mountains. I did see live comedians, and they did make me laugh. Although it was my old bit about some of them had Yiddish punchlines. I didn't know what the hell they're talking about, you know. I tell you, I went to my wife. I said, let's make love. She said, I can't. Went to the doctor, got a pill. You know what happened? Yeah, and I had to ask an old man next to me, what did he say? Ah, the guy's laughing. What did he say? What did he say? You know. And then it was usually an idiom, you know, I have your clothesline in the earth or something, you know. It didn't mean literally what it meant. The whole phenomenon of standing in one, of standing alone, making someone laugh, it comes from English music hall, where there were soloists, but it's really largely a post-World War II phenomenon in clubs. Then by the time I started at the Improv in fall of 66, or maybe the year before, 65, at the Hootenannies in the Village, nightclubs were out of business from television. And then they came back, although they're flattening out now, the comedy clubs. And I think that has a lot to do with cable television. And I did the first ever show on cable. I did a concert for HBO at Haverford College in 1975. I just pulled out the review from John J. O'Connor of the New York Times, who saw it as, quote, a significant something that you're going to see more of, you know. people doing a whole show without a commercial and all that. And I give credit for that to Harlan Kleiman, who then was head of HBO. They only had 800,000 subscribers. They have about 22 million now. And for having the idea, why not take a kid like Klein and show him in his real habitat instead of 5 minutes in the Tonight Show.
I never learned to handle this mic cable. I wish I was like those singers, you know, they always know how to do it in the singing. I never went to that singer's mic school, you know. I hear music when I look at you, yeah! You know, hey, Philadelphia, I love you, baby. They use the wire. Button up your overcoat.
What have you never been asked that you would ask yourself if you were the interviewer?
Gee, that's an interesting question. I've never been asked what I've never been asked.
I'm happy to break new ground.
I think it's safe to say I've never been asked what I've never been asked. You know what is nice? That the longevity part in the business I'm quite proud of. I started out in a time when comedians were freaks. When I was down in the Village trying out on hootenanny nights in places like the Cafe Wah, you know, and with their exclamation point and the bitter end. When one night a week, the regular act, usually someone who was saying, Michael Roka-Plunk, your boat ka-plunk, a shoka-plunk, hallelujah plunk. Remember that? I went on the sloop, John B. ka-plunk, ka-plunk, ka-plunk. Anyway, I was a comedian. They're going, a comedian? Plunk, ka-plunk, ka-plunk. They thought they were cool. That's where I met David Fry, no one has seen much of him, at the urinal. And I saw him. It was a huge urinal down there in a Cafe Watt. I have no idea. The club held 100 people, and there were about 50 urinals. I think it had been a railroad station or something. Anyway, he was looking in a mirror above the urinal going, you dirty... You know, I said, hello. I went to the other end of the thing there. Richie Havens, I met down there. What a wonderful guy. Here he is. He's a multi-millionaire. He's a real... He still has no teeth. I like that spirit in a man. He decided not to have them fixed. He told me he can't sing with them. And stirring tunes. And it does stir me to hear the look, the feel, the fabric of our lives. Ooh.
That's Richie.
Yeah. Or a kind imitator of him. I'll tell you what, if I hear one more time, proud to be your bud, Budweiser. If I hear that one more time, proud to be your bud, Budweiser. That beer is proud to be my beer. I'd like to say, just get me high and shut up.
You can't top the copper top.
Approximately the size of New Jersey. Everything is approximately the size of New Jersey in journalism. Thailand is a country approximately the size of New Jersey. Israel is approximately the size of New Jersey. Your mother is approximately the size of... Well, that's approximately the size of New Jersey. It's the same kind of overall, covers everything cliche as tastes like chicken. That's a good one too, right? A frog's legs? Tastes like chicken. Alligator meat, they have the freshest alligator meat. Tastes like chicken. Rattlesnake steak? Tastes like chicken. Look, what is that? Chicken.
We were talking before about how many comics, for probably a generation and a half now, you've influenced. But have you ever felt that it went beyond influence to where you were ripped off?
Well, there have been times when some direct lines have stolen. I had a funny correspondence with Richard Lewis, who I have a lot of respect for and affection. I mean, he's already a big star. I think he could be even bigger. When I first saw him 20 years ago, whenever it was, I thought he was doing me. And a bunch of people who I knew thought that too. People used to say that about Leno, and I thought that much less about Leno. But I did think it about Richard Lewis then. And one time some friends of his said, oh, we're friends of Richard Lewis. This has got to be, I don't know, 17 years ago, 20 years. And I said, yeah, well, he's doing me a little too much, I think, which was stupid of me to say to his friends. I wasn't furious about it. It wasn't so much material as attitude and sound and rhythm. Well, he wrote me such a hurt letter, not a rude or angry letter. And I wrote him a letter back. Anyway, the end of the story is that he certainly has his own style. Sure, he has influences, and I'm included in them. But I thought when I first saw him, and he was starting out, it was right dead there. And there are some other cases of that. But I felt originality is the most important thing. I was tenacious about it. And my early mentor, Mr. Rodney Dangerfield, you know, in the early years, we were quite inseparable, and I learned a tremendous amount from him.
So you learned from him, but there was no similarity in your respective styles.
Well, you don't think so, do you? Am I like
No.
Rodney Dangerfield? And yet I would say he influenced me in many ways, in technical ways. And from how holding the mic, I went with him on so many gigs. I'll tell you something, all right? You know, I mean, I didn't do that, but the way I had that inner thing of facing the audience. There was a funny thing with Gabe Kaplan, kept on stealing one of his lines. He said, "Stop stealing my lines." All right, I want to. Finally, he pretended to be crazy at the Improv. He said, "You're going to steal my line? Okay, all right, I won't steal your line anymore." Well, 2 months later, he sees Gabe Kaplan do his line. He said, "I thought I told you not to do my line." He said, "Oh, you still don't want me to do it?" I'll tell you, no respect at all. He wrote the greatest jokes, the crispest, beautiful jokes himself early on. And they were stolen wholesale all the time. You see them in joke books. You'd see them, I mean, you know, they were just outright lifted, you know, because they were perfect. They could be done by anyone. They didn't require the attitude.
Easier to steal a joke, a tight little joke, than to steal a whole riff like you would do on stage.
That's correct. And even though I have some tight little jokes in my repertoire and all too, it's a lot of attitude and who you are and what you're doing. With him, the jokes were so crisp and brilliant, they were stolen. And he once asked Phil Foster, who wrote his own material, the late Phil Foster, he said, "What do you do? It's like they're stealing your kids." And he said, "You just write new. You write more." And it's a shame that this day and age, I have a harder time and less facility for protecting my work than Charles Dickens did in 1855 when he was active in transoceanic copyrights and all that. It's a shame because it isn't trivial. It's my living, and I'm doing an HBO show this year. I owe them one, a 6th show, and I have to come up with a lot of new material, and I'm working on it. I don't want anyone taking it.
My neck hurts, you know what? I just came off 2 trial weeks on the Evelyn Wood speed reading course. Have you seen that advertised? These students are actually studying.
Remember the GE College Bowl?
Sure.
Bring it.
Alan Ludden.
Yeah, poor Alan Ludden, late Alan Ludden. They were so smart, you know, they knew the answers before the question, you know. Now, 2 American presidents, you know, before that's a 2-point toss-up. Ready, Harvard. Ready, Holy Cross. 3 American presidents, you know. Or incredibly complex questions like 15 molecules of hydrogen is soluble in water over 116 degrees Fahrenheit. It is unstable. It has a half-life of 35 years. Correct for the first part. I remember someplace in Texas a couple of years ago, in the football stadium, where football is key, I remember that they had a knowledge bowl of some sort, where they had academic contests and the cheerleaders and students cheering for these kids. I don't hear about that so much anymore. And I think it's sad.
See, the thing that struck me when I was 9 or 10 years old and I watched the GE College Bowl, it was never the same teams that played in bowl games on New Year's Day. It was never Texas A&M versus Texas. It was Bryn Mawr versus Swarthmore.
Yeah.
And I figured they didn't even have a football team.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, Oklahoma State, whose contribution to science is the J formation. You know, when the single coach gets paid more than the entire biology department, you know where the school is at. I cross the Henry Hudson Bridge all the time, and I look at poor Baker Field, where Columbia plays football. And, you know, they lose every year, and I said, God bless, good luck this year. I'm going all for them. You know, I watch them on Channel 92, and, with a camera that shakes, with a kid holding it.
Right.
You know, well, Biff, yeah, it looks like another J formation from, Harvard's got the ball. Oh, my God, it's 50-0, you know, and he just...
See, now, in the Ivy League, Harvard plays Penn or Cornell plays Dartmouth, and that's fine. But even as a kid, it always struck me, what sort of masochists are they at Northwestern Obviously, they're adhering to a different academic standard than the rest of the Big Ten. What is Rice doing in the Southwest Conference so they can lose 73-6 every weekend? What is Vanderbilt doing in the Southeast Conference just to get squashed by Alabama every weekend?
Well, they probably should try to improve the teams, but it's a vicious cycle.
Or maybe the other schools should try to improve the school.
Well, maybe so. That would help. I mean, I think a giveaway is when you see a lot of these big schools, and at halftime in the NCAA games, you'll see a little propaganda film, a 2-minute.
Right.
And, Oklahoma State, in the great tradition of, they borrow a guy with glasses in the biology department. He's looking through a thing here.
He's got a Bunsen burner.
And the tradition of scholarship has always and will continue to reign at Oklahoma State. And they come back, and the picture comes live to a kid painted in green with no shirt on. It's 30 below there. Buggy!
That'll do it for visit number 4 to the program from Robert Klein. Always a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Gee, when you're having fun, it really does fun.
Thanks. Robert Klein, folks. Thanks for being with us. See you later.